The woman in the black funeral dress asked to see the body. Dara Adams stood in the corridor of Seoul National Hospital at 2:47 in the morning, holding a chart with a dead man's false name on it, and felt her heart try to leave her chest. Because the body the woman was asking for, the man all of Seoul believed had been cremated 9 days ago, was standing 12 feet away behind a curtain in room 7, holding his own four-pole, with one finger pressed to his lips. "I was his fiancée," the woman said, dabbing at eyes that held no tears. "I have a right to see where he died." And Dara, a nurse who had never told a lie bigger than "I'm fine" in her entire life, looked into the face of the most beautiful woman she had ever seen, a woman she was suddenly, completely certain had helped put 3 bullets into the man behind that curtain, and heard herself say, "Of course, follow me." One lie. That was how it started. By the end, she would tell 100 of them. To police, to killers, to his own blood, because of 6 words a dying man had whispered into the dark when he thought no one could hear him. "Don't tell them I'm alive." Welcome to Afro-Korean Love Stories. Tonight's story is about silent pain, deadly secrets, and a love that grew in the one place death couldn't reach. Drop the city you're listening from in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's dive into this amazing story. Dara Adams had worked the night shift for 6 years, and she had learned that the night tells the truth in a way the day never does. Patients lie at 2 in the afternoon. They perform for their families, for the doctors, for themselves. But at 3 in the morning, when the ward goes quiet and the machines hum like distant prayer, people become exactly who they are. She was 34 years old, Nigerian-born, Lagos-raised, the first nurse in her family, and the only one foolish enough, her mother's word, to take an international placement in South Korea. 6 years in, her Korean was fluent, her apartment was small, and her life was a clean, quiet loop. Work, sleep, video calls home, church on the Sundays she wasn't on shift. She had stopped explaining to her aunties why she wasn't married. She had almost stopped explaining it to herself. The truth, which she told no one, was simple. Dara had loved one man, once, back home, and he had loved what she could do for him more than he had ever loved her. She had carried him through nursing school on her salary and her faith, and he had married someone else the year she left. Since then, she had kept her heart the way she kept her ward at night. Clean. Quiet. Visitors restricted. The John Doe arrived on a Tuesday at 3:12 a.m., and he arrived wrong. Gunshot patients came with noise, police radios, family wailing in the corridor, residents shouting for blood type. This one came in silence. 2 detectives who showed no badges. A surgeon Dara had never seen before, who operated for 5 hours and left without signing the chart. And a name, Lee Junho, 41, construction worker, typed neatly on the admission form above a body that had never done a day of construction in its life. Dara noticed everything. It was her curse. She noticed the hands first, smooth, manicured, a pale band of skin where a heavy watch had lived for years. She noticed the old scars under the new bullet wounds, the kind that made the trauma resident go quiet. She noticed that his emergency contact was a phone number that, when the day nurse dialed it, had already been disconnected. And she noticed that nobody came. For 9 days, nobody came. No mother, no brother, no colleague, no friend. In 6 years, Dara had never seen a man survive 3 bullets and have not one soul in the world knock on his door. Either no one loved him, or everyone who loved him believed he was already dead. She told herself it wasn't her business. She told herself that for 4 nights straight, while she changed his dressings and watched his blood pressure fight its way back from the edge, while the ventilator breathed for him and his face, even gray, even hollow, stayed stubbornly, unfairly beautiful. High cheekbones, a mouth made for arrogance, black hair going soft with neglect. She was a professional. She had seen handsome men before, but at night, sedated men tell the truth. It was the 5th night when he started talking. Korean, low and broken, threaded through the morphine like a man arguing in his sleep. Most of it was noise. Some of it was names. And then, at 3:40 in the morning, with the ward empty and the rain loud against the window, the noise arranged itself into sentences, and Dara, standing over him with a syringe of antibiotics, made the mistake of listening. "They signed it," he whispered. "My own blood signed the order. I saw the seal." A long breath that shook at the bottom. "Let them bury me." A dead man sees everything. His head turned, his brow folded like a boy's. The funeral? Don't cry at my funeral, don't tell them. His hand twitched against the sheet. Don't tell them I'm alive. And then a name. He said a name, soft as smoke, right at the end, and the monitor alarm went off in the next room, and Dara's head turned for 3 seconds, and when she looked back the name was gone, and she would spend a very long time wishing she had heard the end of that sentence. She stood frozen, syringe in hand, understanding arriving in cold layers. The false name, the vanished detectives, the disconnected number. 9 days and nobody came because there had been a funeral. Somewhere in the city, this man's family had already burned an empty box, and someone among them, my own blood, I saw the seal, had paid for the bullets in his chest. She was not supposed to understand Korean this well. She was not supposed to be in this room at 3:40 in the morning. She was not supposed to know that Lee Junho, construction worker, did not exist. Dara set down the syringe with shaking hands and made the only sensible decision available to her. She would forget it. Chart the vitals, finish the shift, request a ward transfer in the morning. Whatever war this man was hiding from, it was Korean, it was rich, and it was none of a Lagos nurse's business. She reached across him to silence his monitor, and his hand closed around her wrist. Not a twitch, a grip. Steady, deliberate, impossibly strong for a man with 3 holes in him. And when she looked down, his eyes were open, black, clear, and terribly, completely awake. How much did you hear? He said quietly, in perfect English. How much did you hear? There are moments that decide the whole shape of a life, and they never announce themselves. Dara Adams stood with her wrist locked in a dying man's grip, 3 floors of sleeping hospital beneath her, and understood, with a strange calm that comes to women in emergencies, that the next words out of her mouth would either save her life or end it. She could have lied. Any sensible woman would have lied. Enough, she said instead, her voice level. Enough to know your name isn't Lee Junho. Enough to know somebody in your own family signed the paper that put those bullets in you. And enough to know that if you squeeze this wrist any harder, you're going to tear your sutures, bleed out in 8 minutes, and make everything they did to you free of charge. Silence. Rain against the window. The monitor counting his heartbeat, which she noticed because she noticed everything, had not risen at all. A man with a stranger's testimony hanging over his life, calm as deep water. Then something moved through his face that she would later learn was rarer than his mercy. Surprise. You're not afraid, he said. I'm terrified, Dara said. But I've been terrified before, and I've learned it's no reason to let a man talk to me any way he likes. Let go of my wrist, please. He let go. And calm Min-jae, though she didn't have his real name yet, lay back against the pillows of his narrow bed and looked at the night nurse the way a chess player looks at a board that has just done something boards do not do. You understand what you've heard could get you killed. I understand it already might have, she said. So you have a decision to make, and I'd rather you make it while I'm standing here than send someone to my apartment later. I'll make it easy for you. She picked up his chart, made her notation, hung it back with hands that only shook a little. I've been a nurse 16 years. I have held more secrets than a priest. Men tell me things at 3 a.m. they've never told their wives, and I have never once carried a patient's midnight out into the morning. Whatever war you're hiding from, I don't want it. I want to finish my shift, go home, call my mother, and sleep. You were never awake tonight. I never heard a thing. She turned for the door. Why? The word came quietly, but it stopped her the way a shout wouldn't have. You could sell what you know. The people who think I'm dead would pay you more than this hospital will pay you in 20 years. Everyone, he said, and for one unguarded second the ice cracked, and she heard the wound underneath it, has a price. Dara looked at him for a long moment. Beautiful, broken, buried alive by his own blood, and so certain the whole world was for sale that her silence frightened him more than a gun would have. Not everyone, she said. Some of us were just raised right. Good night, Mr. Lee. Press the call button if the pain gets worse. It always gets worse before morning. She was at the door when he said it, quietly, like a man setting down a weapon. Min-jae. Kong Min-jae. His real name. She would understand, much later, what it had cost him to give it. That in his world a name was a loaded gun handed grip first, that he had not trusted a living soul with the truth in 9 days, and that he had just trusted her, a stranger, because of one sentence. Some of us were just raised right. "Good night, Mr. Kong," she said and closed the door softly and stood in the corridor pressing her hand to her heart like she could talk it down. That should have been the end of it. She promised herself it was the end of it. But the night shift is long, and room 7 was on her rotation, and a secret shared is a rope tied between two people whether they want it or not. It started small, the way the real things always do. He was awake at 3 a.m. He was always awake at 3 a.m. now. She suspected he slept through the day shift entirely, and a man awake at 3 a.m. with no phone, no visitors, and no name will eventually talk to the only person alive who knows he exists. The fourth night, he asked where she was from, and when she said Lagos, he said he'd done business in Lagos once, and it was the only city that had ever out-negotiated him, and Dara laughed before she could stop herself, a real laugh, too loud for the ward, and she clapped her hand over her mouth, and he smiled for the first time. It changed his entire face. It was criminal what that smile did. The sixth night, she caught him refusing his food tray for the third day running and came back at 4 a.m. with her own thermos. Pepper soup, made Sunday, meant for her own dinner. "If you're going to be stubborn with some protein in you." He took one spoonful with the caution of a man accustomed to poison, and then went so quiet, eating, that she pretended to check the monitor, so he wouldn't be watched doing it. When he finished, he said something in Korean low. "My grandmother made soup like this. She was the last person who ever fed me without wanting something." Then remembering that Dara understood. He looked up, caught. And she just said, "Grandmothers are the same everywhere," and let him keep his dignity, and that, though neither of them said it, was the night it truly began. Because here's what nobody tells you about secrets. They do the work of years and days. Other couples get dinners, flowers, small talks stretched over months. Dara and Min Jae got 3 a.m., the hour when patients tell the truth, every night, in a room the whole world thought was empty. He learned her mother's name and her Sunday routine and the story of the man in Lagos she'd put through school, and his verdict was 7 words. He was a fool, and you were never the foolish one, delivered so flatly, so certainly, that she went home and cried about a thing she thought she'd finished crying about years ago. She learned he'd been raised by that grandmother, that he ran his family's shipping company, the quotation marks lived in his voice, and that he had known the bullets were coming. "I just didn't know," he said, looking at the rain, "that the order would come from inside my own house." "You said a name that night," Dara said quietly. "Sedated. Right at the end." "I didn't hear it." Min Jae was silent for a long time. "Pray you never do," he said. And 2 floors down, at the deserted reception desk, a man in a gray coat was showing the clerk a photograph and asking, politely, in the softest voice, whether any unidentified gunshot patients had been admitted on the second Tuesday of the month. The man in the gray coat was patient, and patience is the most dangerous thing a hunter can carry. Dara saw him before he saw her. She was coming off her break, and 16 years of night shifts had given her a radar for people who did not belong on a ward. He stood at the second-floor station, soft-voiced, apologetic, holding a photograph out to Nurse Beck like a man asking directions. And even from 20 feet away, Dara knew 2 things with total certainty. The face in that photograph belonged to the man in room 7, and if she walked past without stopping, Nurse Beck, sweet, chatty, 3 months into the job, was going to say, "Oh, that looks like the Tuesday John Doe." Dara did not decide to do what she did next. Her feet decided. "Can I help you?" she said, stepping neatly between the photograph and Beck's open mouth. "I run nights on this floor."
"Ah."
The man smiled. His eyes did not. "I'm looking for my cousin. He went missing 2 weeks ago. The family is desperate. We heard an unidentified man was brought here. A Tuesday, perhaps?" "We did have a John Doe that Tuesday," Dara said, and felt the cliff under her toes, and kept walking off the edge. "Motorcycle courier. Head trauma." He passed on the table. The coroner's office in Jongno handles unclaimed remains after 10 days. "You'd want to hurry. They're efficient." She held his gaze, bored, tired. A nurse at 4 a.m. with swollen feet. "I'm sorry. I hope your cousin turns up somewhere kinder." The man studied her for exactly 3 seconds, the longest 3 seconds of her life, then bowed, thanked her, and left. She watched the elevator swallow him, walked calmly to the staff bathroom, and shook until her teeth chattered. When she told Min Jae, she didn't know what she expected. strategy, coldness. The chess player. What she got instead frightened her more than the man in the coat had. Kong Min-jae, who had taken 3 bullets without raising his heart rate, went white, and the monitor beside him finally, for the first time, began to climb. "You lied to Choi Sang-gil's man," he said quietly, to his face, with no warning, and he believed you. He closed his eyes. "You have to stop coming to this room. I'm your nurse. Request a transfer." His voice was flat, final. The voice she imagined boardrooms and worse rooms had learned to fear. "I've buried everyone who was ever loyal to me, Dara. Everyone. My driver of 11 years. My grandmother's cook. They put them in the ground just for being near me, and I lay in a warehouse with 3 bullets in me and couldn't even attend the funerals because I was already supposed to be in one." He looked at her then, and the ice was gone, and what was underneath it was so raw she had to hold the bed rail. "Not you. I am not adding your name to that list. Walk away from this room and forget my face." And Dara Adams, who had spent 6 years keeping her heart clean, quiet, visitors restricted, heard herself answer with a sentence that changed both their lives. "You had your chance to be rid of me," she said, "the night you grabbed my wrist. You chose to tell me your name instead. That was the smartest thing you've ever done and the most selfish, and it's too late to take it back now. I'm already on the list, Kong Min-jae. The only question left is whether you let me stand next to you on it, or whether you make me stand on it alone." The silence that followed was not empty. It was the fullest silence either of them had ever stood inside. He looked at her, this exhausted, magnificent woman in worn scrubs who had walked into his war with nothing but a thermos and a spine of solid iron, and something in his chest that had been dead longer than 9 days rolled over and drew breath. "Then God help you," he said softly, "because I find I'm not strong enough to send you away twice." 3 nights later, the woman in the black funeral dress came, and you already know that part. What you don't know is what happened after Dara said, "Of course, follow me." She led Yoon Chiren. That was the name on the visitor's log, written in a hand as elegant as its owner, away from room 7, down the far corridor, to the room where the motorcycle courier had actually died. She spoke of head trauma. She kept her voice in the soft register nurses save for the grieving. And Chiron dabbed her dry eyes and looked around the empty room and asked her questions. Was he in pain? Did he wake? Did he say anything at the end? And Dara answered them, and it was in the middle of the 4th answer that Chiron made her mistake. 3 bullets, she whispered, pressing the handkerchief to her lips. They told us he wouldn't have felt anything after the 1st. Dara kept her face perfectly, professionally still, 16 years of practice holding the line, while her whole body went cold. Head trauma, she had said. Motorcycle courier, she had said. Nobody had said bullets. The word had walked into that room inside Yoon Chiren's own mouth, and there was only one place it could have come from. The beautiful fiancé wasn't checking where her beloved died. She was confirming the kill. Yes, Dara said gently. That's what they say, and walked the woman to the elevator and bowed and smiled and memorized everything. The scar of pale skin on the ring finger, wrong hand for a mourning bride, the phone that buzzed twice and was silenced twice, the perfume, too bright for grief. And as the doors closed, Chiren looked up, and for 1/2 second the mask slipped, and the eyes that met Dara's were not sad at all. They were doing arithmetic. Let's pause right here, because I need you to sit with what this woman is carrying now. Dara has lied to a hunter, refused to save herself, and just looked into the eyes of the woman who may have signed her man into a grave, and she cannot tell anyone. Not the police. Not her mother on Sunday calls. The only person on earth she can tell is the dead man upstairs, and telling him means breaking his heart with his own fiancé's name. So be honest with me. Would you tell him straight, or protect him from it a little longer? Could you have kept your face still in that elevator? And that thing Chiren said, 3 bullets. Did you catch it before Dara did? Drop your answers in the comments, because this comment section is where we reason together. And if this story has its hands around your heart right now, do me one favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, because you are exactly the family this channel was built for. And what happens when Min-jae hears that name? You do not want to miss. She told him everything except how much it was going to hurt. The pale ring of skin on the wrong finger. The perfume with no grief in it. The phone silenced twice. And the 3 bullets that nobody, not the fake chart, not the invented courier, not one word out of Dara's own mouth, had ever mentioned. She laid it all out quietly, clinically, the way she'd deliver a diagnosis, standing at the foot of his bed at 3 in the morning with her hands folded so he couldn't see them tremble for him. Min-jae listened without moving. And when she finished, he did the thing that broke her heart properly for the first time. He nodded once, like a man receiving news he had already paid for. "You're not surprised," Dara whispered. "I was shot on a Tuesday," he said. "I had dinner with her on the Monday. She chose the restaurant." He looked at the window, at the rain that seemed to have been falling since the day he arrived. "She ordered for me. She was charming. She kissed me goodnight and told me to drive safe, and 11 minutes later my car was stopped on the Bampo Bridge by men who knew which door I'd be sitting behind."
A breath.
I have replayed that dinner every night in this bed. I kept finding reasons it couldn't be her. "You've just taken the last one away from me," and I find his voice, for the first time since she'd known him, cracked down the middle. "I find I'm grateful." Which is its own kind of sad, isn't it? "Min-jae, there's more. You should have all of it." He reached for the phone she had smuggled him, a cheap prepaid thing she bought with cash at a corner shop, the single most criminal act of her law-abiding life, and turned the screen toward her. A Society page article, 3 days old. A photograph of Yoon Chae-rin, radiant in white lace, on the arm of a tall young man with a beautiful, weak, familiar face. Calm group air announces engagement. A season of mourning gives way to joy. "My brother," Min-jae said. "Min-suk. Half-brother. My father's son by his second wife. I taught him to ride a bicycle. I covered his debts, twice, quietly, so our father would never know. When my father died and the family council needed a head, I took the seal so Min-suk wouldn't have to carry what it costs." His thumb moved across the photograph with terrible gentleness. "The order that killed me carried the family head seal, Dara. I saw the stamp on the paper. There are only 2 hands that seal has ever lived in. One of them is mine." The room was very quiet. Even the rain seemed to lean in. 3 weeks, Dara said softly. "He buried you 3 weeks ago, and he's already engaged." "To your," she couldn't finish it. "To my fiancé." "Yes." Min-jae set the phone face down, and when he looked up at her, she watched him do the thing he did. Watched him reach for the ice, the stillness, the chess player, and watched it fail. It simply wasn't there anymore. 9 days of pepper soup and 3 a.m. and a woman who was raised right had melted it out of him, and what was left sitting in that hospital bed was just a man, betrayed by his blood, erased from his own life, alive in one room of one hospital in a city that had already finished mourning him. "Everything I built is his now," he said. "My company, my house. My name is on a stone on a hill in Payu. There is officially nothing left of me, Dara. So I need to know something, and I need the truth, because you're the only person alive who has never lied to me." He held her eyes. "The man they buried, the man with the seal and the towers and the terrifying reputation is gone. If I walk out of this hospital, I walk out as no one. A dead man with a borrowed name. So, why are you still here? What could a woman like you possibly want from what's left?" And Dara understood, finally, the question under the question, the one he'd been asking since the night he offered her money and she wouldn't take it. Everyone has a price. What's yours? No one had ever wanted the man. Only the seal. She crossed the room and took his face in both hands the way you hold something you have decided you are not going to lose, and answer him. "You think you became no one," she said. "Min-jae, look at me. The company, the seal, the name on the stone. That was the costume. I never met that man. I don't want that man. I fell for the stubborn one who wouldn't eat, who talks in his sleep, who remembered his grandmother's soup, and tried to send me away to keep me breathing. He's not no one. He's the realest thing I have ever held in my 2 hands, and I have been alive 34 years and loved exactly one man before you, and he wanted my salary. So you ask me what I want." Her thumb traced his cheekbones slow. "I want the dead man. The world can keep the rich one." For a moment he didn't breathe at all. Then Kong Min-jae, Mafia boss, ghost, heir to nothing, pulled the night nurse down to him and kissed her the way drowning men break the surface, like the air on the other side of her mouth was the first he'd trusted in years. It was not a polite kiss. It was 9 nights long. Her clipboard hit the floor and neither of them heard it, and when they finally broke apart, both of them shaking, his forehead against hers, he laughed, young, wrecked, disbelieving, and whispered the sentence she would keep for the rest of her life. Every word I've said since I woke up in this room was a lie to someone, Dara Adams. You're the only thing I didn't lie about. She was still smiling against his mouth when her pager went off. Nurse Beck, front desk. 2 lines that turned Dara's blood to ice water. That man from before is back asking for you by name. Says the Jongnyo corner has no record of any courier. Should I send him up? Min Jae felt her stiffen and read the screen, and she watched the man she loved and the ghost he'd been folded together into something new, something with her name inside its reason for living. Dara, he said, very calmly, pulling the 4 line from his own arm. Help me get dressed. It seems I have to come back from the dead a little earlier than planned. The man in the gray coat stepped out of the elevator with his soft apology already loaded, and walked into a dead man standing in the middle of the corridor, dressed, calm, hospital band still on his wrist like a piece of jewelry he hadn't decided to remove. To his credit, the hunter didn't run. Men in his trade see everything twice before 40. But Dara, standing at Min Jae's shoulder, watched the photograph in his memory line itself up with the face in front of him and watched his whole posture change, from hunter to messenger. Because that is what happens to hired men when the mark turns out to be alive, unafraid, and smiling. You've been looking for me for 2 weeks, Min Jae said pleasantly. I'll save you the fee. Go back to whoever pays you and deliver 1 sentence. The seal was used by a living man's family, and the living man is coming to take it back. Word for word. And tell them, his hand found Dara's, deliberately in full view. The nurse is under the protection of everything I have left. Which is more, he added softly, than anyone believes. The man looked at their joined hands, bowed, deeper than politeness required, and left. The engagement banquet of Kong Min-suk and Yoon Chae-rin was held 11 days later in a hotel ballroom with 400 guests, and it will be remembered in Seoul for exactly one reason. The moment the doors opened at the toast, and the dead elder brother walked in wearing a black suit, 3 healed bullet wounds, and a night nurse from Lagos on his arm like a queen. Dara would remember the silence, 400 glasses stopping midair. She would remember Chae-rin's face doing its arithmetic one final, frantic time. But most of all she would remember Min-suk, because the boy dropped his glass, and the sound he made was not guilt. It was joy. Raw, ugly, weeping joy, the sound of a man being handed back the thing he could not live with losing, and he crossed that ballroom at a run and gripped his brother like a drowning child, saying it over and over into his shoulder. Hyung, they told me you were already dead. They told me you were already dead. And there it was. The truth, arriving the way it always does, too late and all at once. The succession paper. Min-suk wept. She brought it to me the night of the accident. She said you died on the bridge, that the council needed a signature and seal by morning or the company would be frozen. She held my hand while I stamped it. Hyung, I buried you. I chose your stone. He stopped. He straightened. And Dara watched the weak, beautiful face do the first strong thing of its life, turn toward its own fiancé. But you knew before anyone called us. You were planning the funeral while he was still on the operating table. Chae-rin, what did you do? Chae-rin stood very still in her lace and looked at the 2 brothers, the one she tried to bury and the one she nearly finished stealing, and then, strangely, her gaze slid past both of them and found Dara, and the mask came off entirely. What was underneath wasn't hatred. It was something colder. Recognition. One strategist saluting another across a lost board. You, she said quietly, should have taken the money. Everyone has a price. So I've heard, said Dara Adams. Some of us were just raised right. They never got to arrest her. In the crush of security and shouting and 400 phones, Yoon Chae-rin set down her champagne, stepped through a service door, and walked out of the story the way smoke leaves a room, leaving behind a forged seal, a hollow grave, and a jet that departed a private airfield 40 minutes later with no filed destination. They never found her. He never stopped looking, but that came later. That night, in the wreckage of the banquet, Min Jae stood before the stunned family council, the uncles who had signed off on his funeral a little too quickly, the cousins already redecorating his office, and he did not take revenge. He did something none of them had a defense against. He resigned, slid the recovered seal across the table to his weeping brother. You buried me once, he told the council. Stay buried to me and we're even. And then Korea's most feared dead man took the hand of a night nurse in a department store dress and walked out of his empire the way other men walk out of prison. 3 months later, at 3:07 in the morning, Dara came off shift and found him waiting at the hospital entrance in the rain. No umbrella, no bodyguards, holding her old thermos in both hands like an offering. Inside it, pepper soup he had made himself, from her mother's recipe, obtained through a Sunday video call Dara had known nothing about, and sunk to the bottom, wrapped in wax paper, his grandmother's ring. I checked the visiting rules, Min-jae said, as the rain flattened his expensive haircut and her heart, clean, quiet, restricted, for 6 long years, threw its doors open for good. Family is allowed at any hour. Marry me and I'll never make you sneak me in again. She said yes before he finished the sentence. Some questions have been answered since the 5th night, and both of them knew it. Here's the thing about being buried. It shows you, with terrible honesty, who mourns and who measures. Min-jae lost an empire and found the one person who would have sat by that hospital bed if he'd woken up owning nothing at all, and maybe that's the only wealth that has ever really counted. Everyone had a price in the end. Hers was simply too high for money. The truth, at 3 a.m., from a man with nothing left to lie for. So tell me, if you had heard what Dara heard on that 5th night, would you have kept the secret, or protected yourself and reported it? Could you forgive Min-suk, whose weakness was the weapon someone else fired? And Min-jae walking away from the entire empire for a life at street level, the most romantic thing a man can do, or a decision he'll regret? Drop your answers below. This comment section belongs to you, and I read everything. And listen, they never found Yoon Chae-rin. Min-jae never stopped looking. If tonight's story held your heart in its hands, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell. New love stories drop every single week, and this family is not complete without you in it. Share this one with somebody who needs reminding that being loved for what you own is not the same as being loved.